Hello, Mr. Buffington here. We are looking at the best Wordle word combinations. This is a bit of an advanced video on Wordle, so if you're not familiar with Wordle, definitely check out the rules and play a few rounds before we get into this level of strategy. In this video, we are going to be talking about word combinations. It's mainly the combinations between words 2, 3, and 4 words. However, we will talk about the first word as well and what might be some good ideas for the first word, but we're going to be mainly focusing on word combinations. It always does start with the first word, so we will look ahead. We will look at that, but you can look ahead for 2, 3, and 4 word combinations if that's more what you're interested in. Let's talk about the two different pieces of data that I looked at before I kind of fell upon this strategy. I looked at the data for how often letters actually appear in all of the words that could possibly show up for Wordle. Here are the letters written in order of the most frequent to the least frequent. E is the letter that appears most frequently. J is the letter that appears least frequently inside of all the words that you could possibly see as answers inside of Wordle. There is another piece of information that I find actually more helpful, and that's the word frequency. In other words, how many words is the letter E in? How many words is the letter A in? And this changes slightly based on duplicate letters. So if you have a word like mama, M-A-M-M-A, the letter M would be boosted up in letter frequency, but that wouldn't help you for most words, right? And that is the actual list I'm going to be using. So you can see it here. I've highlighted the few times that it actually changes the order. All right. Actually, this one doesn't appear to have changed the XZ order there. But you can see that the order doesn't change a lot of things. U and C were switched, H and D were switched, G and M were switched, and then Z and X both are very minimal. So I'm going to use the word frequency data as opposed to the letter frequency moving forward. So I'll just switch it over there. Now let's talk about words. Now I have the list of letters listed by 5 letter, 5 letter, 5 letter, 5 letter. So good first words are going to use as many of those letters from the top as possible. Here are some examples of ones that I think would be great. Tears. That uses T-E-A-R from the first top letters, and then the S is a little bit farther down. So this is a pretty good word. We also have atone, which uses, again, 4 letters from our first row, and then just the N from the second one. And I'm going to put stare in there, and stare might be one of my favorite starter words. Even though it's the same letters from tears, it's actually a little bit better of a word. And the reasons are slightly subtle, but mainly because inside of Wordle, very few words end with the letter S. They don't have a lot of plural words in there, and they don't have a lot of words that end with S. So actually putting S at the beginning of the word versus the end will help you to get those green boxes instead of the kind of orangey yellowish ones. All right, let's look at 2 more words. Arise. This one here has 3 from our top row and then 2 from our second, and then resin, which goes back to actually 2 from the top, 3 from the second. I think all of these are pretty good first words. You could also, of course, make your own, but what I would recommend is pulling as many letters from the first row as you can and then move your way down. Now let's look at word combinations. This whole thing is going to basically look very similar from here on out. Good combinations of 2 words should have most of your letters in the first 2 rows. So here's one example, arise and clout. Notice when we do this, we do have to spread out the vowels a little bit more to try and make 2 words, and you'll see that as a pattern as we move away. As we get to 3 words and 4 word combinations, you have to have less vowels to be able to have cover the same amount or cover as much territory as possible. For arise and clout, notice all of them are in the first 2 rows except the letter C. That's a great, absolutely great combo to use if you're using a 2-word combination. Another great 2-word combination is here's and blunt. The letters that are a little bit more spread out than our first example, but you see that again you're using a ton of those letters from the first 2 rows, and the ones that you're using after that are still pretty high up on the list. The third example that I'm going to share is share and count. Share and count has all of the letters in the first 3 rows and most of them in the first 2. So you get a really good covering of the letters when you're using these words. It might mean that your first word is not quite as much in the first row, but with the combination of the 2, you get really good coverage of the first 2 rows. And that's the difference when you're talking about using multiple word combinations. Let's get into 3-word combinations. And when we get here, you're starting to throw away the as many letters in the first row rule as we go. You're just trying to make whatever words you can with 3 rows worth of letters, and things start to kind of, I don't know, you'll start seeing. So I use that word tears, which you saw from before. Again, that could have also been stare, right, which probably would have been a little bit stronger. But I use tears, hound, and limpy. When you put those 3 words together, you get, bam, a really powerful start with all of these letters. All of them but one are inside of the first 3 rows, and none of them are repeating. So you get 15 letters, all really high frequency letters. This is a great 3-word combination. Let's go to our next one, breaks, doing, and umpty, which is kind of a funny word, but it helps us get a bunch of letters that are, again, really close to the top. We're avoiding those bottom 2 rows there, or bottom 1 in a bit, and still getting really good coverage of letters. If we go to our third example, spear, mound, and light, you're getting, again, a really heavy concentration in those top 3 rows. So any of these could work really well together. Notice that the words aren't all the same, but some of them are similar, hound and mound, obviously, but we're kind of getting a decent combination of words in there, and you can throw them around and kind of use them as you need. When we get into 4-word combinations, things get a little bit hairy. So let's go ahead and do that. 4-word combinations. I'm going to look at 3 different combinations of 4 words. The first one is dunks, womp, calyx, and fritz. This one here, I actually heard a very similar one to this with, instead of dunks, I think it was junks, but I don't like using the word J, the letter J if I don't have to. But this covers an awful lot of letters. There are no repeated letters in this entire thing, so it covers 20 letters with 4 words, and that's great coverage of the letters. The letters that are not covered, however, are E, G, B, V, J, and Q. What I don't like about this list, and we'll talk about it a little bit more, is that the letter E, the number 1 letter, is actually not covered in this. So that's why this one is not my favorite combination. Let's go ahead and look at a combination that I put together that I think is a little bit better. Brown, xylem, acids, and thugs. And this one here, you're actually getting 19 letters because the letter S is repeated in acid and thugs. So you're not getting quite as full coverage, but the letters that are left over are actually, I would say, weaker letters that you're not touching on, right? There's nothing in the top 2 rows. There's only 1 in the 3rd row. So you're getting a little bit better coverage of the stronger letters. And my personal favorite group here is spare, mound, light, and bucky. This group here is just, for me, a powerhouse. There is an overlap of the letter U, to be able to do these 4 words. But I think that's a compromise that's pretty good, with the letters that are left over being almost entirely at the bottom of our list of effective or frequency letters. So just to kind of compare these, I'm going to show you that I'm going to cross off the letters that are in all 3 groups. So V, Q, and J are in none of the 3 groups. And that's fine because they're the least frequent, some of the least frequently used letters. So we're absolutely fine cutting those off. But again, in my first letter, having E, G, and B are kind of stronger letters. So I'm going to kind of drop those 4, even though it is cool that they have 20 separate letters. I'm going to say I don't use that group. The ones that I do use over here have F in common and Z in common. So it helps us to compare these lists. If you use the Spare, Mound, Light, and Bucky list, really the advantage is that the W and X aren't being used versus the P and the K. So you can see that the third list there is a stronger list of 4 words that gives you good combination, good coverage of the letters that based on frequency, and you will definitely, in almost all cases, be able to solve. If you use those 4, you'll be able to solve it in the final 2. I hope that video was helpful for you in looking at your combination of words. A couple of final thoughts. Number 1, change it up or it'll get boring. Don't use the same groups and combinations every single time. Know some combinations that you can use, but definitely change it up. And you always need to adjust based on your given information. If you have 3 green letters in your first word, don't stick with the standard combinations. Change it up a bit based on that information that you're given and try new techniques. I wish you all the best. I hope you have fun with Wordle. Have a wonderful day.